You're standing on an open plain. The wind is low, the ground is dry. And in front of you, maybe 200 yards out, is a woolly mammoth. It's roughly the size of a school bus. Its tusks alone weigh more than you do. It can run faster than you. It has 4 legs to your 2, a hide thick enough to absorb impacts that would kill a person outright, and absolutely zero interest in whatever you're about to try. You have no bow, no spear, no trap, no net. You have the clothes on your back, the people standing beside you, and a brain that hasn't changed much in the last 100,000 years. That's it. That's the whole inventory. And yet, across 6 continents, on every landmass humans have ever walked, the Megafauna is gone. The woolly mammoth, gone. The American mastodon, gone. The giant ground sloth, the cave lion, the short-faced bear, the Irish elk with its 12-foot antler span, all of them gone. And in almost every case, they disappeared right around the time humans showed up. Not a coincidence. A pattern so consistent across so many species and so many geographies that paleontologists have a name for it. The Quaternary extinction event, the largest die-off of large animals since the dinosaurs. And the leading suspect isn't a meteor, it isn't a virus, it's us. Small, slow, mostly naked us. Now here's where most people reach for the obvious answer. Early humans had weapons. Spears, fire, stone tools. The image is almost cinematic, primitive warriors in furs launching spears at charging beasts. And look, that's not entirely wrong. Stone-tipped projectiles do appear in the archaeological record. Fire was absolutely used as a hunting tool in certain contexts. Some of those kills were absolutely violent and up close and required extraordinary physical courage. No question. But that explanation has a serious problem. A problem that doesn't get nearly enough attention. The timeline doesn't work. Many of the most dramatic large animal kills in human prehistory happened before sophisticated projectile technology was widespread. Before the atlatl, before the bow and arrow, before anything you'd confidently call a weapon by modern standards. Archaeologists have found butchered mammoth remains at sites where the only stone tools present were basic choppers and scrapers. Not hunting weapons. Processing tools. Tools you use after the animal is already dead. Which raises a question that should genuinely unsettle you. How do you kill a 6-ton animal with a rock you use to clean the carcass? The answer isn't what most people expect, and it doesn't involve a lucky throw or a heroic charge or some secret physical advantage our ancestors had that we've somehow lost. It involves something far stranger, and honestly, far more impressive. It involves the specific, almost bizarre combination of features that make humans uniquely terrible as animals and uniquely lethal as hunters. The nakedness, the weird upright posture, the inability to run at anything approaching the speed of the things we were hunting. All of it. Every apparent disadvantage turns out to be load-bearing. Because here's what the fossil record, the ethnographic evidence from modern hunter-gatherer populations, and a growing body of biomechanical research are all pointing toward. Ancient humans didn't overpower the megafauna. They didn't outrun it. They didn't outclaw it or outtooth it or beat it in any physical category that would show up on a chart. They outthought it. And more specifically, they outlasted it. The real weapon wasn't in their hands, it was in their physiology. In a specific, almost accidental evolutionary feature that turned slow, fragile, sweat-soaked humans into the most relentless pursuit predators the planet has ever produced. Something that no mammoth, no giant sloth, no cave lion had any evolutionary defense against because nothing like it had ever existed before. And once you understand how it worked, you will never look at a marathon runner, a hot summer day, or a prehistoric kill site the same way again. Picture a hunting party. 4 or 5 people, no horses, no vehicles, nothing mechanical. They spot a kudu, a large African antelope, built for speed, capable of hitting 40 miles an hour in a straight line. The hunters start jogging toward it, the kudu bolts. Obviously, because that's what prey animals do when a predator approaches. It runs, puts distance between itself and the threat, and by any reasonable physical calculation, that should be the end of the story. Except the hunters don't stop. They keep jogging, not sprinting, not chasing, just jogging at a pace they can hold for hours. The kudu is long gone, disappeared over the horizon. The hunters follow its tracks. They find it resting in the shade a mile away. It bolts again. They jog after it again. This repeats and repeats. And then something happens that looks from the outside almost impossible. After 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours of this, the kudu stops running. Not because it's cornered, not because it's been wounded, because it simply cannot cool itself down fast enough to keep going. Its muscles are flooded with heat it cannot expel. It is, in the most literal biological sense, cooked from the inside. It stands there. And the hunters walk up to it. This is called persistence hunting. And it is almost certainly one of the oldest and most effective killing strategies in human history. Here's the biology that makes it work. And this is the part that sounds like a mistake until you sit with it. Mammals regulate body temperature largely through panting. When a dog runs hard, it opens its mouth and pushes air over its tongue, and that's how it dumps heat. It works fine at moderate speeds over short distances, but panting requires the animal to slow down or stop to do it effectively, and at a full sprint, most quadrupeds simply cannot pant and run at the same time. The respiratory rhythm of four-legged locomotion locks breathing to stride. Every footfall is a breath. The faster they run, the faster they breathe, but that breathing isn't efficient enough to cool a body generating that much heat that fast. Humans have a completely different system. We sweat. 2 to 4 million sweat glands distributed across almost the entire surface of our bodies, evaporating moisture continuously, dumping heat in real time while we're moving without interrupting the mechanics of locomotion at all. You can sweat and run simultaneously with no conflict between the two systems. That is genuinely unusual in the animal kingdom. Combine that with bipedal stride, which decouples breathing from footfall entirely, and what you get is a creature that can maintain aerobic exertion for a duration that is simply off the chart compared to almost anything else alive. We are not fast. We are not strong. We are not well armored, but we can run at a moderate pace for longer than almost any other animal on Earth without overheating and dying. We are the endurance animal, the long game predator, built not for the explosive burst, but for the grinding, relentless, hours-long accumulation of distance. David Carrier, a biologist at the University of Utah, laid out the physiological case for this in the 1980s, and it has only grown stronger since. Anthropologist Louis Liebenberg spent years documenting persistence hunts among the San people of the Kalahari in Botswana, one of the last cultures where this technique survived into the modern era. His footage and field records show exactly what the theory predicts. Hunters jogging. Animals fleeing and fleeing and fleeing until they can't. No dramatic confrontation, no heroic moment, just patience and thermoregulation winning against speed and power over the course of an afternoon. And here's the thing that should stop you cold. If this worked on kudu and the Kalahari, it worked on larger animals too. Slower animals, animals with even more metabolic heat to dump, and even fewer options for dumping it. A woolly mammoth running at full speed generates an extraordinary amount of body heat. It has a thick hide, a layer of fat, a heavy coat. It is spectacularly well insulated. In cold weather, that insulation is survival. On a warm day, being chased by 5 humans who simply will not stop, it becomes a death sentence. The hunters didn't need a weapon that could kill a mammoth. They needed a weapon that could make a mammoth run until its own body became the thing that killed it. And that weapon was already built into every human body on the planet, invisible, metabolic, and more lethal than anything you could hold in your hand. There's a cliff in New Mexico called Blackwater Draw. It doesn't look like much today. A dry arroyo, scrubby desert vegetation, unremarkable landscape in every direction. But starting in the 1930s, archaeologists digging into that dry ground started pulling out something extraordinary. Mammoth bones. Dozens of them. Stacked and arranged in patterns that couldn't be natural. And embedded between the ribs and vertebrae, stone spear points. Not scattered randomly the way scavengers leave a carcass. Positioned, deliberate. The physical record of a kill. Frozen in sediment for 13,000 years. Blackwater Draw is one of hundreds of sites like it across North America, Europe, and Central Asia. And when researchers started mapping them, a pattern emerged that persistence hunting alone couldn't explain. These weren't random kills on open ground. They were concentrated at specific geographic features, river crossings, narrow canyon mouths, the edges of bogs and marshes, the bases of cliffs. The animals weren't just being run down, they were being steered. This is where the story of prehistoric hunting gets genuinely complex, because what the archaeologic Owl evidence is increasingly revealing isn't just physical endurance, it's spatial intelligence. The ability to look at a landscape and see it not as it is, but as it could be made to work. To identify a bottleneck a mile away and design a hunt around it before the hunt begins. To coordinate multiple people across multiple positions with no radio, no signal, no shared map, using nothing but prior agreement and an intimate knowledge of how frightened animals move. Researchers studying Paleolithic kill sites have found evidence of what they call game drives. Large-scale coordinated hunts where groups of humans, sometimes dozens of them, spread out across a wide area and systematically compressed a herd toward a pre-selected killing ground. Noise, fire, movement, and the basic psychology of prey animals all weaponized together. A mammoth or a bison or a horse running from what sounds like a threat on its left will veer right. If there's another threat on its right, it veers left. If both flanks are covered and the direction of retreat is chosen carefully, the animal runs toward whatever the hunters have already decided is waiting for it. A bog is a perfect example. Soft ground that looks like solid ground. A large animal at a full run hits it, sinks, struggles, and burns through the last of its energy reserves fighting terrain instead of distance. There are mammoth kill sites in Europe where multiple animals died in the same boggy depression within what appears to be a very short time span. That's not coincidence. That's a trap that took planning, coordination, and detailed local knowledge to set and spring. Fire changes the calculation entirely. Controlled burns have been used by hunter-gatherer societies on every inhabited continent, and the evidence for prehistoric fire use in hunting contexts goes back tens of thousands of years. Fire does several things simultaneously. It panics animals in ways that override their normal flight instincts. It eliminates the option of retreat in one direction. It drives movement in ways that are predictable if you understand the terrain and the wind and the behavior of the species you're targeting. A hunter who knows how a mammoth responds to smoke from the north on a west wind, and who has walked this valley enough times to know exactly where the ground gets soft near the eastern tree line, isn't using fire as a weapon in the way we usually think about weapons. He's using it as a steering mechanism. The animal makes the decision to run east. The hunter made that decision for it 3 hours ago. What this requires isn't strength. It isn't speed. It isn't a sharp edge or a heavy point. It requires a model of the world inside your head that is accurate enough, detailed enough, and shared precisely enough with the people around you to execute a coordinated plan across space and time. It requires language, or something close enough to it. It requires memory. It requires the ability to imagine a future event and work backward from it to present actions. To stand on a hillside, look at empty ground, and see in your mind the animal that isn't there yet and the moment it will arrive. That cognitive capacity, the ability to build a mental model of a future hunt and coordinate other minds around it, is the weapon. Not the spear point embedded in the rib. The spear point is just the punctuation at the end of a sentence that started days earlier when someone looked at a landscape and said, in whatever proto-language or gesture system they used here, we do it here. You go left, I go right. When it runs to the cliff. The mammoth, for all its size and strength, had no response to that. No evolutionary defense against being outplanned. Because nothing in its entire evolutionary history had ever outplanned it before. It was built to outrun predators, to outlast them, to absorb their attacks and survive. It had millions of years of adaptations for every physical threat the Pleistocene could produce. It had zero adaptations for a creature that could model its own behavior and design the terrain around it in advance. That asymmetry between raw physical power and abstract forward planning is what ended the Megafauna. Not muscle, not metal. A species that could think further ahead than anything it was hunting, and talk to the person standing next to it about what they were going to do about it. Here's what's strange about all of this, when you step back far enough to see the whole picture. Every other apex predator on Earth earns that status through its body. The great white shark has been essentially the same animal for 16 million years because it doesn't need to be anything else. Jaws, speed, electroreception, a sensory suite so refined it can detect a single drop of blood diluted across an Olympic swimming pool. The lion has retractable claws, binocular vision calibrated for low light, a sprint that covers 100 feet in 3 seconds. The eagle has hollow bones, a visual acuity 8 times sharper than a human's, and talons that close with 600 pounds of force per square inch. Every apex predator is a physical argument. A body that says, without ambiguity, I was built for this. And then there's us. No claws. No fangs worth mentioning. Eyes that can't see in the dark. Ears that miss half the frequency. Range a dog considers basic. A sprint that would embarrass a golden retriever. Skin that tears on a thorn bush. A core temperature so narrow that a few degrees in either direction, and the whole system starts shutting down. By every metric that the natural world uses to evaluate a predator, we are a joke. A slow, fragile, temperature-sensitive primate with good posture and an excessive number of opinions. And we killed everything. Not gradually, not reluctantly, not in isolated incidents scattered across millennia. We walked on to continent after continent, and within a geologically trivial span of time, the largest animals in those ecosystems were gone. North America lost 34 genera of large mammals after humans arrived. Australia lost over 50 species of megafauna. The pattern repeats everywhere, across every landmass, with a consistency that the fossil record makes impossible to dismiss. The most physically imposing creatures to ever walk the earth were outlasted, outmaneuvered, and outthought by something that couldn't outrun a deer. What this tells us about human nature is something that doesn't get said directly enough. We are not a physical species that developed intelligence. We are an intelligence that built a physical workaround. The body was the limitation. The mind was the adaptation. Everything that made us weak as animals. The lack of fur that forced us to regulate temperature through sweat. The upright posture that freed our hands. The slow reproductive cycle that forced investment in offspring survival. Every apparent disadvantage fed into a cognitive feedback loop that produced something the natural world had never encountered before. A predator whose primary weapon existed entirely outside its body, in the shared mental space between individuals, in language and memory, and planning, and the ability to transmit accumulated knowledge across generations. A lion cub learns to hunt by watching its mother. What it learns dies with the individuals who held it unless another animal is watching. A human child inherits 10,000 years of accumulated hunting knowledge, geological understanding of local terrain, species behavioral profiles, seasonal patterns, tool-making techniques, none of which any individual alive had to discover personally. We don't just think. We think collectively, across time, in ways that compound. Each generation starts not from zero, but from the highest point the previous generation reached. That is not an animal adaptation. That is something categorically different from anything evolution had produced before. The mammoth never had a chance, not because humans were stronger or faster or fiercer, because the mammoth was playing a game with rules that had governed predator and prey relationships for hundreds of millions of years, and humans had quietly rewritten those rules without the mammoth knowing the rules had changed. And here's the part that should land personally, because it's not just ancient history. Every time you solve a problem without the obvious resources, every time you find a way through something that should have stopped you, every time a group of people coordinates around a shared goal and accomplishes something none of them could have done alone, you are running the same core process that a group of humans ran on an African plain 100,000 years ago, looking at an animal they had no business killing. The tools are different. The stakes are different. The setting is almost incomprehensibly different. But the underlying thing, the willingness to substitute ingenuity for force, coordination for strength, patience for speed, and collective knowledge for individual capability, that hasn't changed. It's the oldest human technology there is, older than the wheel, older than fire, older than language itself in its fully developed form. We were never the strongest thing in the room. We just figured out earlier than anything else that being the strongest thing in the room was never actually the point. The mammoth was stronger, the cave lion was faster, the short-faced bear was more terrifying by any physical measure you want to apply. None of them are here anymore. We are.